Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of The Infinite Potential of Being Human. This is for the podcast and also for those of you watching at our YouTube channel. Welcome, welcome, welcome to this week. I feel like I'm about to do something that feels really vulnerable and tender and in the unknown, and I think it's worth it. So I'm going to do it anyway. But today I want to dive into a topic that I know is really, it's tender and raw and probably one of the most challenging topics around to dive into a dialogue about and an inquiry about, because it carries so much within all of us. And today I want to dive into the topic of motherhood and parenting and how we can start to bring maturation into how we parent our children. And this is not just for those of you who are mothers. This is for those of you who are parents, but it's also for those of you who aren't parents that had parents. My intention is that in this episode, you can hear yourself more deeply, and it will help you not just understand more deeply why you are the way you are, because you once were a child and you have had parents. Every human being on this planet has once been a child and has had parents. But also, if you are a parent, it might liberate you in trying to have to do it the perfect way and carry the guilt and the shame and the burden of trying to work out how you can prevent your children from going through what you went through. And now I'm not saying that isn't a responsibility. It is a responsibility. But my intention is that what I talk about in this episode will liberate you from the grip of the trying part and start becoming more conscious to the being part. And it will make more sense as I speak. 100% of the people that I have worked with, and I have worked with all kinds of human beings in very, very, very deep spaces, meaning I'm lucky, I'm privileged. It is an honor that the people who come to work with me tend to tell me the deepest truths about themselves. And usually these truths are what they can't even tell themselves about themselves. And so there's an extraordinary level of vulnerability and tenderness and authenticity and purity and rawness that comes with the exposure of revealing the truths that we bury, the truths that we hide, even from ourselves. And so I don't take it lightly that is my job, to be a facilitator of such rawness and vulnerability and truth. And in the 15 years that I have been facilitating and leading this work, I have been working with people from all walks of life. And I have worked with 88-year-old grandmothers to 21-year-old male students straight out of uni, to I've worked with people who have come straight off the streets into the chair opposite me. They are without homes, without money, without anything, and they are living on the street. I have worked with people of all genders and colors and languages and cultures. And I'm sharing this with you because it's important, meaning the external differences have been vast amongst the people that I have worked with. And yet, even though there have been so many differences amongst the people that I have worked with, when you get underneath the surface level of those differences, when you go deeper and you get to the root of what is running each one of those human beings' pain and suffering, and survival and identities. It's not that there are just similarities amongst all those different kinds of people that I've worked with. We are the same. It is the same. Because what is consistent, even though there are many differences, is that they are human beings. There is a particular design structure that runs at the root of human survival, of human being, meaning the way that human beings are being, run by the human mind and the nervous system, and the nature of identity, and the way that identity generates the appearing of reality. That is universal amongst our species currently, until we mature and evolve to the next way of being, which we may or may not be in that process right now, if it reaches critical mass enough that it shifts the entire collective paradigm from which we are being run and we are creating our reality. Now, that's important. That's an important piece of information to start this episode with, because it is at this root level, even though there are many differences, meaning those of you who are listening, you're all going to be coming from different walks of life. Some of you will be mothers, some of you will be fathers, some of you will be sisters, brothers, uncles, grandmothers, grandfathers. Some of you may be older, some of you may be younger. You may be black, white, brown. You may be Muslim, Christian, Catholic. There are so many differences amongst all of you who are listening. And yet the consistency is, I'm pretty sure 100% of you are human. I don't think we have any dogs or cats yet that listen to this podcast. So I'm going to make the assumption that the consistency amongst everybody who is listening to this right now is a human being. And it is at that level that I can speak to every single one of you in a consistent way, meaning everything that I say relates to you because you are a human being. So the point of why I just set all of that up like that is that amongst all the people that I've worked with who tell me the deepest truths about themselves, I've discovered many things, but one of the things that I've discovered, which is relative to this episode, is that 100% of those human beings, their identities, which usually comes online in the stages of human development, the human identity comes online around 4 or 5. The brain develops enough that we mature from our sense of self, which begins as kind of a soup of experience as newborns. We experience ourselves as a soup of experience, and we experience reality consistent with that soup of experience. You know, when you look at newborns, they're just kind of in a daze, staring around. There's no distinction between the newborn and mummy, or their arm and the chair. Like, everything is just a soup of experience. And there's no such thing as time, and there's no night and day. None of these distinctions have been wired in the neural pathways of a newborn's brain. So their experience of themselves is just this big soup of buzzing, blooming experience. And that is, of course, consistent with how reality appears. As a newborn matures into baby, that sense of self begins to mature into more physical sensations. They relate to themselves and communicate and experience themselves as physical sensations: cold, wet, hungry, uncomfortable, need, animalistic need for touch or bonding, connection. Like, it's all kind of physical impulses that drive their sense of self. And of course, their behavior is consistent with that sense of self. When they're cold, they cry. When they're hungry, they cry. When they want touch, they cry. When they're uncomfortable, they cry. That the behavior of a baby is in correlation with the sense of self that they have. That is their identity at that time. At that time, there is no me yet. They don't think of themselves as a someone. They don't perceive themselves as a someone. Well, then in the stages of human development, that starts to mature into toddlerhood, which then begins to mature from a sense of self from physical sensations to emotional impulses. And of course, anybody who has had a toddler or spent time with a toddler can verify that that is very, very accurate. Toddlers are run by emotional impulses. They want now. They need now. When you say no to them, they rage. When you say love them, they completely fall into your arms. They are absolutely run by emotional impulses, and that is their sense of themselves. And of course, the way reality appears is consistent with their sense of self, with their way of being. Now, once that toddler starts to develop even more, and these are organic biological stages of maturation. The next stage of human development comes around 3, 4, 5, generalization, slight generalization, but around that time, when the sense of self matures from emotional impulses into a mental concept, a self-image. That is the beginning of the human identity coming online, meaning it is around 3, 4 that human beings start to perceive an image that they have of themselves as a me. When I asked my little boy, my boy is 7, I remember when I asked him, "Who are you?" when he was 3 years old, and he would just say, "Oh, I'm me." But then when I asked him when he was 5, "Who are you?" he would say, "Oh, I'm Callum." And I could see as he said to me, "I'm Callum," he was seeing an image in his mind of a Callum. He was now starting to relate to himself as a someone with an identity, as me, as an identity called Callum. Now, that's not just a name. He saw himself inside his mind. Now, it's so mechanical that we don't realize that that's what we're doing. It just appears like that's who we are. But of course, that's not what's happening. What's happening is that this self-image is now being formed. A perception of oneself, your sense of self, is being shaped and developed and formed in the mind. Who you start to perceive yourself as me is a mental concept. It's a thought wired in with experience and a story. And so around 4, me comes online. And of course, where does Callum suddenly get everything he perceives himself as Callum? The only place that could come from is his environment and the people around him. And predominantly the most fundamental people around him are mother and father. And so 100% of the people that I have worked with, their me's, their identities were formed and shaped by what they perceived as who they are through their mother and father's perception. Now, most people may understand this as information, but I want to take it deeper so that you can start to experience this experientially and start to get a sense of why you may be the way you are or perceive yourself as the way you are, and then how we can help our children in becoming far more empowered in being human beings, because our children are human too. Every human being is run by the same human condition. So no one gets out of this one. So what most people don't realize is that most people think that we get our sense of self based on what our parents did do or didn't do, meaning they didn't love us, or they weren't there, or they were critical with me, or they lost their temper with me. And those things are accurate and true, but that's not the full picture. The missing distinction, which most people don't realize, is that as well as absorbing and shaping your perception of oneself and your identity given by what your parents did or did not do, what's even more impactful that shapes our human identity is what we absorb through our parents' way of being, meaning children learn more from who their parents are being over what they do or don't do, or say or don't say. What I mean by that is the state of the parent's nervous system and energetic frequency and emotional state will be what their internal world, basically what the parents are experiencing or looping in internally, run by the brain mind, the nervous system and the mind, the survival mechanism. Children will absorb that mechanically, no matter what the parent does or doesn't do. And that is predominantly a blind spot. I had a profound conversation with my daughter recently. And I have brought my daughter up, she's 12, to not only become present and conscious to her emotional world and her mental world. I am trying to teach her how to be aware and conscious of her own self. I am also teaching her to become aware and conscious of the human condition, meaning there is something that runs her and me that is not personal, but it is our responsibility. As long as we're human, we have to deal with it. And so we had this amazing conversation the other day when she was sharing with me some struggles that she's having at school right now. And I'm not going to go into the details because, parents of her school may be listening or whatever. I don't want to expose her too much. But she was sharing some really delicate details with me about how she struggles with particular dynamics with friends and boys and her body. And she was being extremely vulnerable and honest with me and very conscious. Like, she was very aware of her behavior and then what she's making her behavior mean about herself and how she beats herself up about that, but she can't stop it. And she was sharing all this with me. And it was so profound for me because it was another validation to what I'm teaching you. No matter how much I loved her, I have told her how beautiful she is. I have told her how much I love her. I breastfed her till she was 3. She has slept in my bed until she never wanted to anymore. And sometimes she still climbs in. I held her. I did contact parenting. I did everything opposite to how my mother was with me. I did all the right things as best as I could. But regardless, as she was sharing with me these struggles, I realized, it's not the first time I've realized this, but I'm using it as an example, that they are the identical struggles that I struggled with when I was that age. She was struggling with a particular story that she perceives herself as not good enough and not worthy, which then drives a particular need and neediness to try to get validation and proof that she is good enough, that continually validates that she doesn't feel good enough. And then she finds herself in that vicious circle. Now, go back to the episode before this, where I speak about the 5-step process to break the vicious circle, and this will make more sense. And so again, I realized that even though I did all the things that I could do to do it right, better than my mother, she still inherited and absorbed who I was being at the time, how my nervous system was when she was in her first 4 or 5 years. And when I saw that, because I understand the nature of how the human condition works, I didn't go into shame and blame and guilt of myself and, oh my God, it's all over and I fucked up and I've been such a bad. No, I actually said to her, darling, I really, really hear you. And I was exactly the same. And I've told you before that I will do the best that I can to outgrow as much as I can that I inherited from Nana. But I am going to pass stuff on to you. And so it will be your work to then do that work. And I will help you learn how to have a relationship with it so that you can do that work. And she sat there and she was so heard and seen, and at the same time empowered that this work, that this pattern that she has is, firstly, she's not alone with it. She's not to blame for it. In fact, she inherited it from me, and I just gave her the way. I just let her off the hook by telling her that she inherited it from me. But at the same time, she is responsible for it if she wants that to be different and change. Wow. If we can educate our children young, who do they grow up as then? That alone makes me excited for my daughter. And the point of what I'm saying is that even though we do all the right things, a child's identity is shaped by the state of the parent's nervous system. I remember watching an interview by Demi Moore, and she was with her 3 daughters. And Demi was just sharing about how she had fallen back into addiction, and how she had been in addiction most of her children's early life. And her daughters said something really profound. Mum told us that she loved us every day. She told us we were beautiful every day. And yet none of those words ever penetrated enough, because how she felt about herself and who she was being with herself was what we learned about who we are. You know, when I said to my daughter, you inherited this from me, I also said to her, I wish that my words would be able to penetrate deep enough to shift this story for you. But I know they won't. I know that words don't do that. So I'm going to help you and gift you with something even deeper. And that is to start having a relationship with this story so that you can start to shift it, knowing it's not who you are, but it is what you feel and experience. And so I want to teach this episode on starting to shift the paradigm from where we're parenting our children, but also, if you're not a parent, being able to listen to this and hear this so that you can get some sense of why you may be the way you are. What did you absorb? Even though your parents might have done all these things, they were not present and conscious to who they were being. And one of the hardest things that human beings, I see in the people that I work with when they come into our programs, is that people can be very aware. They can know a lot of things about themselves. They can have a lot of information, but that does not mean that you are conscious in who you're being, in the state of your nervous system, and how that nervous system is emanating into the world. You may say all the right things, but if you are emanating intense insecurity and anxiety and then hiding it, burying it by behaving and controlling and acting in particular ways, suppressing it, the behavior does not suppress what is being buried at the root. What is being buried at the root will still be emanating and running you. That will be speaking louder than anything you say or do, which is why people find themselves looping and repeating repetitive patterns no matter what we do, because it's who we're being that is shaping the unfolding of your world. And who we're being happens on a body-mind level. It happens on a brain, nervous system, identity level. So, shifting our relationship, our paradigm from doing to being. And so the greatest gift that we can give to our children, yes, of course, we still have to be responsible for doing better, showing up, speaking kindly, being loving, being honest, being conscious, being validating. Yes, we have to do all those things. But what is even more fundamentally important is starting to become responsible for who we are being, how our body, mind, nervous system identity is emanating. Are we resisting being responsible for that and just trying to do all the right things? Because that's not going to go deep enough. If we're going to shift the generational pattern of inheriting stories on top of stories on top of stories, we need to start shifting from doing to being as grown-ups. And for those of you who aren't parents, who want to get more of a deeper awareness of why you are the way you are, start to become present to who your parents were being. 100% of the people that I've worked with, I have taken back into regressions, and they experienced who their parents were being. Even if the mother was in the room all the time with them, they experienced a deep sense of disassociation and disconnection and loneliness, even though the mother was right there, because the mother was so disconnected from herself and so disassociated from herself that that is what the child absorbed and then began to perceive and made a story about it of who they are. It must be because I'm alone in the world, even though the mother was physically there all the time. That's an example of what our responsibility is now. And by shifting the state of our nervous system and our identity, the relationship with our body-mind survival mechanism, maturing beyond it, that not only shifts who you are in your life and how your reality unfolds, but it completely starts to break the generational patterns for our children. I have literally seen people come into our Listening to Life program, and just from the massive shift that they have in the program of maturing beyond the mechanical survival identity that's running them, that they're not aware of, just that shift alone, their children shift at home, separate from them. I have been in programs facilitating when something really deep releases from me, because whenever I facilitate, I do the program as well. I'm always absorbing and experiencing it. My daughter releases something in New Zealand in her bedroom because we are intricately connected through the nervous system and the field. And so the greatest gift that we can give our children is to prioritize our maturation. When we mature beyond the survival mechanism, the vicious circle, the identity, the running route of survival stuck and frozen in time in our memory bank, that not only shifts us, but it shifts how our children perceive and experience themselves. And then being able to communicate from this place to our children. Children, in my experience, they just want to be told the truth. It's very confronting because 100% of the people that I've worked with, when I've taken them back into regressions into their childhood, they knew when their parents were lying to them. Even though if the parents were lying to them for the thinking it was for the greater good for the child, the child feels the inauthenticity and the disconnect. They feel the parent resisting themselves and not telling the truth. And then that sets up a whole load of confusion in the child's system, that what they're picking up, they can't trust. And the people outside of them are not authentic. I think that one of the main reasons why children end up rebelling is because the parent was inauthentic to themselves and the child experienced the parent's inauthenticity, meaning then they're fake. They're not telling me the truth about themselves. When I tell my daughter, yeah, wow, I have had to work on that one big time, she feels that I am a human being and I'm a conscious human being, and I'm not pretending that I'm not a human being, and I'm not pretending that I'm any different from her. In fact, we're run by we're the same species. So this is such a gift that we can have, and we can begin, is starting to shift, take the pressure off of, I got to do this right. I got to always be there for them. I got to always be the perfect mom, and I've got to do the perfect thing, and I got to be the perfect way. I mean, I'm not saying don't do that. I'm just saying that that's actually not going to solve the problem. What is going to solve the problem is when you start shifting your own awareness and consciousness from what you're doing to who you're being. Wow, no matter what I do, I am always constantly running on anxiety. And deep, deep, deep and down inside, I always think I'm not enough, and there isn't enough, and I'm not going to be safe. That's my work. Wow, that is the vicious circle that I am in. I need to go into my maturation to outgrow that, so that my nervous system destabilizes and then stabilizes into a new normal and matures. And then my child can experience that more mature state. And then I can talk to my child, who's run by the same human condition, from a different context. So I'm going to record like a series of episodes on parenting and children, and just the relationship of the family field that we inherit and absorb. So keep a lookout. I'm gonna keep these as shorter episodes because they're deep, and just keep kind of covering more pieces and distinctions that I think might be really helpful for all of you. So thank you so much for listening. Do take a moment to just kind of write stream of consciousness on an A4 piece of paper, everything that you've heard here, just so that you can start to integrate what it is that you have absorbed from this episode. And as you are integrating and absorbing it, it should kind of make more pops and aha moments for you. If you have found this episode useful, do share it. Share it with parents, share it with other friends, share it with anyone that you think it will be beneficial to. If you're listening and watching on the YouTube channel, please write a comment below. You can ask questions below and subscribe to our channel. But more importantly, and most importantly, share this with as many people as you can that you think it will be beneficial to. And do listen for the next episodes coming. I'm going to be diving even more into the generational family fields that we inherit that shape our way of being and the way our reality goes, and how we can start to mature and outgrow that. Also, if it helps, go back and listen to episode 4, I think is on the identity and the shaping of identity, which I think will be really beneficial and helpful for you. And also go back and listen to the episode on healing the mother wound. So yeah, that will be great reference points for you. Otherwise, thank you so much for being here. This is The Infinite Potential of Being Human, and I am Nikki Clinch.